Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Angelo Leal versus Tomoki Kameda fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into this. So this is Angelo Leal's first defense of his IBO World Featherweight title, and it's him going away. He's going to fight as not the away fighter, but the fighter who's going to be, I suppose, away at some point. The best way to put it is, he's going to fight in Japan as the world champion. He's taking the risk and fighting a contender, and you got to give him full credit for wanting and being willing to do that, because it's difficult to go to Japan and fight these lower weight division fighters. There's a lot of really good talent, and yes, Tomoki Kameda hasn't ever been able to, especially in recent times, really set the world alight or anything like that. But he's definitely going to be a top name. I mean, people don't realize that this fight is both of these guys. Well, I suppose, Leal's already achieved it. He's already become a two-weight world champion. But this is Kameda also trying to become a two-weight world champion. People forget that Leal was WBO Super Bantamweight champion. And people forget that Kameda was WBO Bantamweight champion. And the Bantamweight champion in Kameda, that must have been over 10 years ago now. I think it was 2014, 2015, and then he fought O'Donnell twice and he lost twice. And he then went on to move away from that division after that. And he has been a world champion. He's got that definite experience about him. Like I mentioned, that was 10 years ago when he was still fighting for world titles, and Leal's nowhere near had that level of experience. I think Kameda's been fighting professionally since 2008, which is insane. And saying he's only, I believe, 33 years of age, it shows that he's been able to achieve a lot and still perhaps might have some of his best years still in him. It definitely will be interesting to see. And he's coming off a good win himself, which is definitely getting slept on a little bit. I think as an opponent in general, he's getting slept on just because of how big of a raw Leal made in his last performance. But Kameda went and avenged a defeat in which he had. He's only gotten a few defeats against some quite good names, and he went and avenged one of them defeats via beating him via split decision last time out in Japan. And he even, I think he scored a knockdown. I might have been ruled a slip, but inevitably he got a 10-8 round, and that was enough for him to be able to win via split decision. And that was a good performance from him. That was showcasing that he still does have enough in him to be able to fight at a high level, and I believe that was an IBF eliminator. So there's no real surprise that the IBF have been wanting their contender, the new champion, to take on this mandatory defense. But like I say, like I touched upon, Leal made a real statement last time out as he stopped Lopez, and stopped Lopez in really emphatic fashion. I mean, Lopez was on seemingly a great run, and arguably he was the most feared fighter in the division. He was knocking out a lot of opposition and looking really, devastating. The way that he knocked out Josh Warrington was a great victory, and he really had gone on a run where he was getting some, like I say, real good knockouts. But his style was, the only real fight you can, I suppose, compare it to was that of a Navarrete. Yes, it wasn't too similar, but it was very awkward, and it was very fundamentally leaving himself vulnerable. And Navarrete has been able to do it and been able to have a lot of success in his career fighting with these blaring defensive errors, just due to his speed. And seemingly Lopez's speed was not anywhere near kind of the levels of Leal. Yes, he was able to land some shots, and arguably he was landing shots which perhaps seemingly were seen to be a bit stronger and a bit more powerful than that of Leal in the fight between the two of them. And he had a really good, nice inside uppercut that he was landing quite consistently against Leal. But what Leal was doing was just being able to walk through it. And, he was able to fight like he did against Fulton when he fought Fulton, but inevitably he was having a lot more power in his punches, and you got to kind of argue that down to the weight. He definitely did look good, and yes, like I say, he wasn't landing on paper as big a shot seemingly as what Lopez was able to do without, Lopez didn't really seem to be able to fully commit to his shots, but he just has always had that natural power. Leal, again, like I say, hadn't always been able to showcase a natural level of power, but the kind of shot that he did end up landing that was enough to knock out Lopez was a great shot. I mean, it was an amazing shot, but it was fundamentally quite a simple shot to land. I mean, it was just a right hook, and Lopez just had his hands so low down that he just hit him right on the button, and that's all it was. It was right place, right timing, and I felt like you could see that Liao was, getting there with his shots and at times landing a relatively big shot and, having success. And he was always throwing. He most definitely was outpacing and out throwing Lopez, and that was, blatantly obvious. But, I don't think Lopez had faced a power puncher in his career, and I think as the champion, you could tell that he was getting very comfortable in his style. And like I say, his style was defensively poor already, so for him to get comfortable was inevitably going to lead to him, most likely getting knocked out. And yes, it was a brutal knockout, and since then he's been able to go on and pick up a win in his last fight via stoppage in round one, since Lopez has moved up in division. But like I say, that was a huge statement victory on the biggest of stages when nobody really expected that to happen at all. And now Liao has had multiple fights seemingly available to him. I respect him for taking the mandatory defense. I feel like he arguably first of all didn't have a choice, but at the same time I think it is a good thing because I think Kameda is going to showcase a real different style. And I think at the same time, yes, Liao has been a champion in the past, but he went on to fight a challenger in Fulton who was looking really good at the time and, was on the come up, and this was his world title opportunity, and he went on to lose that one. So I feel like Liao needed a first defense that wasn't just going straight in for one of the top names to realistically prove that he is a valiant champion and to kind of brush off any cobwebs in which, or nightmares that were lingering from the fight against Fulton, where that was a real firefight and a really excellent performance. I think inevitably Fulton was just able to somewhat outpace Liao, and like I say, he did damage him in close. And I think Liao again is, he has his defensive vulnerabilities. I think he does stand square on and kind of in front of you, so he definitely is there to be hit. But I think against a Kameda who, Kameda's good. I think I really like how he follows off his jab, and he does inevitably put together his punches quite well. And he always, like I say, follows off his jab. He pairs up his jab really well. He can throw, three jabs and it can have success. And Fulton was having success when he beat Liao with his jab in the earlier rounds. But I just think Kameda, something that he doesn't do very much is throw when he's on the back foot and going backwards. And I feel like when you're against something like a Liao, you have to be able to throw in close and throw backwards. Yes, the jab is going to possibly be able to land and have success against Liao, but I don't think Kameda's jab is as good as Fulton's, and I don't think it's thrown with any much near as intent. It's a good point scoring punch, but it's not thrown with a crazy amount of force behind it. So I think Liao is going to be able to push through that, and inevitably I think Liao is going to be able to stop Kameda via TKO in round 9 in his home country and put on an excellent performance where, like I say, he does outpace Kameda. I don't believe he's going to be able to get a massive statement knockout. And of course, whenever we see a fighter coming off a huge knockout victory where, the moment's basically gone viral, to really put them into the stardom, it's quite often that we then try and well, then we move on to see the fighter think that they're a power puncher and really try to load up on their punches, and it's just not realistically what you want to see, because that's not what made them good. The punch just came when they were fighting their fight, and you don't need to change your style to try and become something that you're not. And I don't believe that Liao's going to do that. Like I say, I think he's going to be able to outpace him, outthrow him. Like I say, he might struggle with the jab a bit in the earlier rounds, but inevitably I think he's going to be able to get through that and win, like I say, via TKO in round 9. Then who he can go on to fight next? I mean, like I say, Fulton is WBC champion. He's now himself moved up into the featherweight division, of course, after what happened with his loss versus Inoue. So that could be a great fight as well. I mean, a rematch there after a great fight in the first fight. I feel like Liao has fundamentally improved a bit so as a fighter, and like I say, I think he's going to be coming into that fight, if he comes into a rematch, with confidence. And so I do believe he could win, or possibly put on a good performance against Fulton. Yes, Fulton is coming off a great showing against Figueroa, which was a bit of an upset win, but I think that could make for a really good fight, for a unification fight, and or fight a fight like a Ray Vargas fight, Kameda fought Vargas and lost, but Vargas, we don't really know what's going on with his career. He drew versus Nick Ball, and when Nick Ball was really trying to, get a rematch made, he seemingly has gone a bit quiet and hasn't fought since, and that was a little while ago now. So I'm not entirely sure what's happened with him. Seemingly he's vacated his title, but again, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen with him. Or, if he wants another possibly now voluntary defense, he could fight Trinidad, who's been progressing well on the UFC Fight Pass with 360 Boxing Promotions and just fought last weekend on the Bohachuk Fox undercard and looked good in that one. And he's gotten a good record, and he's definitely, in line to fight for a world title. So Leao might be willing to give him an opportunity. Another fight which is on this card is another lower weight division fight, the lowest weight division, and it's another fighter from Japan trying to showcase that he's worthy of becoming a world champion. But this is a rematch. This is Pedro Taduran versus Genjiro Shigeoka for the IBF World Minimum Weight title, and it's a rematch, like I say. And the first fight was a shocking moment. I mean, realistically, I've touched upon this a few times on the channel, but both the Shigeokas were really exciting commodities coming into the minimum weight division, and I feel like at the time it was a division which really lacked, a real standout name. They had Neomtrong, who was champion for such a long time and wasn't really fighting that consistently, and was a good Thai fighter, but didn't really showcase anything, crazy, and didn't really bring the minimum weight division to light. And we had the fighters like Colazo and like the Shigeoka brothers, and we were, expecting them to be on a collision course at some point where, at least one of the Shigeoka brothers would go on to fight Colazo, and that's not really been the case. Like I said, Genjiro was arguably always the more skilled in that of Yodai Shigeoka, and you know Genjiro got the opportunity to face Pedro Taduran, who isn't a bad fighter at all, and really showcased that in the first fight versus Shigeoka. I mean, Taduran has only ever lost realistically against some top guys in the division and hasn't had too many defeats on his record. And I think Genjiro was really trying to put on a statement performance and perhaps let his ego get the better of him a bit too much, and was trying to stand toe to toe against Taduran instead of doing what he is and has been known best for doing, which is, yes, landing a singular shot, but being able to have a lot of power and utilize his timing and be able to move in, move out, and, not just stand toe to toe. But instead, like I say, he tried to, and it just didn't work out for him. And inevitably, he did get stopped, and that was, quite a devastating defeat for him. And it has pushed him back a bit. And since then, Colazo has gone on to achieve great things, and he's beaten the Armstrong, and he's become a unified champion. Whereas, Tanduram has waited for Genjiro for a rematch, but like I say, it's going to be difficult to see if Genjiro can get through it because he is only a young guy, a young fighter. Perhaps it was too soon for him to be put into a world title opportunity. He kind of had to be moved fast because the way he was progressing and the minimum amount of talent in the minimum weight division. But it definitely was too soon against Taduran in my opinion, and perhaps that might have stunted his whole potential in his whole career because of just how it was a great fight, and it was arguably one of the fights of the year, but it was, like I say, quite a bad stoppage. Yes, he didn't get dropped. Yes, he didn't get knocked out, but you could tell that there was a lot forced out of him from Taduran. The Filipino fighters, especially in the lower weight divisions, are really known for their excellent body work and just absolutely spraying the body, really brutally wearing you down to the body. And Taduran did that so well in that first fight. And, Melvin Jerusalem, who fought Yoda Shigeoka, was able to do that as well and do that really well. And so it will be interesting to see what version of Shigeoka we get for this fight, if he's going to be able to come back and if he's going to be able to showcase the style in which we're known for, or if he's going to try and get into a firefight again, because I don't think he's going to be able to land these singular shots in which he once was landing. But I perhaps think that could be a better strategy if he is to tire out Taduran. He can hurt him. I think he did have him hurt at one point in the fight in the mid kind of rounds, like round 5. But he wasn't able to capitalize upon it. And so perhaps if he does move around and does try and land his singular shots, he might be able to land one that does really hurt Taduran and then try and go on and capitalize, because he's not a bad fighter still at all, and he does throw his punches and he does have good level of power still, Genjiro. But inevitably, I do think he's going to not be able to contain Taduran for the entire fight and slow him down enough. So I do think that Pedro Taduran is going to be able to win. And I think he's going to be able to stop him earlier and stop him via TKO in round 5, which would be, like I say, a devastating defeat and a real shame to see for the guys who really backed him out in Japan. And like I say, he had so much expectation when he was coming through and starting up in the division, and to see him, Yudai Shigeoka, yes, lost but didn't lose in quite as bad fashion. And if he does lose in back-to-back stoppages against Taduran, then that has really shone his name out to kind of picture as an opportunity in a fight against Collazo. And then perhaps Taduran then himself can go on to fight Collazo, and he's realistically then really turned his career around and could go on to, that would probably be arguably the biggest payday for any opponent or for any fighter in the minimum weight division, because of course Collazo has been, on these Latino fight nights, and seemingly, with Riyadh season, they want to do another one of them. So perhaps the winner of this could go on to fight for that, or perhaps he could go on to fight someone like a Kanoy, who is a good Filipino fighter who could make for a good fight, or again, the name in which I just mentioned, Melvin Jerusalem, WBC champion. That could be a great unification to just brutal, all action, maybe not too much defense, but like I say, all action, full on pacing the entire fight, straight in front of you the entire fight, body punches against each other from the Philippines. That could be a huge event in the Philippines, and that could at least bring some, fans to the minimum weight division in the Philippines. But yeah, that is it for today's video. I hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, need to like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.